No, starting. Hello. These are the TROM discussions about the TROM documentary, the part about family and love. I am Sasha. Here I have Michael with me from Sweden. And there we have Bobby from Nevada and Chris from Australia. These are just open discussions for anybody to join. We're not representing any particular organization or anything, in case anyone's watching. Cool. Okay, so I wanted to start off talking about marriage, because right now I'm living in Russia, and I haven't lived anywhere else where marriage is such a massive concept. It's a massive concept in a lot of places, but here I feel like it's extremely exaggerated. It's people constantly worried about marriage, constantly talking about marriage, and it seems like it's everyone's goal just to get married and then have kids. And I see it as a concept, like a goal that needs to be reached here, rather than people just wanting to enjoy each other's company, or to feel some kind of love for another person, a connection with another person. That doesn't seem to be the goal, especially from people like my grandmother and anyone's grandmother in Russia. They're just like, the most important thing is marriage. It doesn't matter to who. It doesn't even matter if it makes you happy or not. It's just, this is supposed to be your goal. And luckily, I'm past the age. I'm too old now for this concept of marriage to be valid for me anymore, because I'm 29. And so maybe they can leave me alone soon, because I'm not going to do it. And anyone else see this as a problem in their culture?
For sure.
Yeah, I think it's a global thing. Like, I notice it's less of an issue in some more liberal places, like in some cities like Los Angeles. It's like way more liberal, and people are not really thinking about marriage. And then you go to somewhere more like, more conservative, and then it's like marriage is the thing. Like, people are married at like 18, whereas in more liberal places, people can either go without marrying, or they'll marry at like 30, or like beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit silly, because for me, I don't understand, if I enjoy the company of another person, I want to be with them. Why do I have to have a massive party and sign a piece of paper to prove to other people that I love this person? I think that shows some kind of insecurity in people.
It's crazy. I know in Sweden, I'm also 29, and I have no real pressure of getting married, actually. My family, weirdly enough, wants me to be happy in some strange way. So for them, it doesn't matter too much. My sister is actually going to marry soon, but she's the only one out of 4 kids that haven't gotten that far. So let's see. But for me, the tricky part is whenever someone says marriage, or like party for a couple, or whatever it is, everybody knows what it is. Many people want to show up. It's like something that ties cultures together. But my problem is there's no alternative, and people won't hear to anything else. It's like trying to beat Christmas. It's very hard. It's like trying to get people to meet up for different reasons that are not very cultural. Like, it's, for example, in Sweden, we're not the most social people. We don't talk at the subway and stuff. So at Christmas time, if you don't have a family, you're pretty much left out. And if you won't get married, yeah, it's more fine here in Sweden than maybe in Russia. It's pretty crazy. But it's like everybody gets the same package, no matter what, and no matter what hurts them. I guess we all accept marriage like the general relationship. Many people are stuck in a relationship maybe for economic reasons or different ones, and they're not happy. They feel that the relationship got worse, and they're stuck there because they have to, or they don't know how to have fun together anymore. I don't know why that is actually, because some people have a really good relationship and live together, but it's strange. I don't know. Maybe it's getting together for the wrong reasons and making a big thing out of a bad marriage at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think because people think that they need to get married because that's just the thing to do. Instead of, yeah, I would say that is definitely the wrong reason. It's just accepting it as like as something that people do, and then just being like, okay, well, and then you jump into this like, you know, very binding agreement that has all kinds of ramifications for, you know, financially and legally, etc. I think one of the arguments for marriage is kind of, it is almost that same thing, because when you do something like that with someone, it requires a different level of commitment. Like, you know, you can't just be like, okay, this person is really pissing me off right now, I think I'm just going to leave. Because if there is no, if there's no marriage, there's no certificate, then you really are just free to walk out. But when you're bound in that way, it is a different level of commitment. Like, you really would have to make more effort to make things work, because if you're really going to be with someone for the rest of your life, then you better fucking sort it out. Like, if you don't get along, then you have to get to the bottom of it. So I think that's like one argument for marriage that I've heard. That's not to say that I agree with it.
It's a good argument. It's only that like you're forcing people to like be in a group. Like they're not natural. Like it's because if it was like, you know, like a better relationship would be one where both parties have the option of just leaving, but they don't. And if you force people into being in a relationship, then maybe that's going to have some, well, it has some negative effects. And also there's a market for it. Once you create a market for it, then there's going to be people who are going to try
Diamonds.
yeah, exactly. Do the diamonds thing, and like try to manipulate it for profit. Like right now, I think I just typed like marriage into Google, and like the first thing that came out was like it was like a diamond, the companies and stuff like that that wanted, you know, that want to sell stuff. So
Yeah,
the De Beers Diamond Corporation.
Yeah, they're the ones that created the concept of a diamond engagement ring, a diamond company.
Yeah,
and
then you have to pay 3 months rent, 3 months salary. Sorry,
3 months salary for it.
Yeah, it's like the most successful fucking scam. That's crazy.
Yeah, just that.
Yeah,
they have
bought that shit.
I even heard like stories about bacon and eggs. Like, egg farmer wants to sell more eggs, and they put their eggs in one basket, so to say, or like cooperated, and that's probably how it was born. It wasn't like most of the things we do; they were introduced either to commercials in modern times, or basically, I think most traditions was survival. So we changed it at one point in time to eat certain things or not certain things because we had more of one, less of the other. And today it's like, it's crazy. People want to keep still many traditions and have never learned how to question it. I notice myself when I try to eat different things or behave in a different way, like do different things on regular dates. People get why, but usually for me, what I ate before or what I did before, I never chose it. It was cultural. I didn't experiment. I ate what everybody else ate or I thought was really good, or it might be something like that, because I heard like really closed cultures or conservative, like many of them, they don't hear anything else, or even if they do, it like bounces off because they know the only one good way. And even if they divert, they get their whole family, maybe all the friends, anyone from the region or country might turn against them because they're like hurting their feelings by being the one of the few that like turn their back or like do something different. So I remember my grandparents, they got anytime my mother's even my mother, but her like siblings, when they broke up with their so to say loved ones, my grandparents, even though they usually cared about a lot of things and were empathic in different ways, they got really upset. It was like their kids were hurting them, but it was not about them. It was
They
about their
took it
kids.
personally.
So it's interesting.
Like when the kids disagree with the cultural norms.
Yeah, like when
yeah.
they're kids in their 40s and 50s, or 45 to 55, I don't remember exactly, but when they broke up, their parents got upset and thought their kids were hurting them, and they felt failures, like a failure of a parent, like they were 70, 80, 85 years old,
Yeah.
and they still got that upset. It's pretty interesting. And I tried to talk to them, like saying they're happier now, they broke up, and I was a teenager then, maybe like 20, 22 even, and they didn't listen. It was very hard to reach them because they were so emotional about it. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting in a scary way, actually, because otherwise I think they were pretty good considering the culture they grew up in and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of that's one. I don't know when these concepts force people to stay in these relationships, and parents would just perpetuate these concepts, and they don't even think about why, like when you don't question your own culture, I think that's a massive problem, really.
Do you notice anything in your regions about marriage that, or even like living together, that many parents stay just because of the kids? Because I've noticed that, like, many parents have really bad mental health because they are too stressed. They don't have time to like be together with their loved one, and then the relationship is really shit, and they have to deal with it just because they have the kids. Which, of course, it can help the kids, but it's
Not if you're
massive.
fighting all the time. Yeah.
Of course, but also I think
Yeah.
even if
I think stay together for the kids is a bullshit concept. Like, it's not a good idea.
Well, yeah, I mean, if the parents aren't getting along and they're fighting all the time, this is going to reflect.
Yeah, you can't raise kids in a toxic environment. You'll just mess them up even more. I mean, like divorce is will affect the children as well. Like that's, or like just not even divorce, just like separation of the parents. Like you don't, as a child, you don't give a shit about the word divorce. Like it doesn't. That's not really a factor. It's just the fact that your parents are separating. But if they're just together and they're resenting each other, then that's even worse, I would say.
Yeah, and this is a massive problem when you force this idea of marriage on people as just a cultural goal, like it's forced in Russia, and people think, women think that they're not cool if they're not married by age 25 or whatever, and so they try to find any asshole to marry, and they will find some asshole to marry and have kids with, and this will all happen within 1 or 2 years. And by the time the baby turns 3, they hate their husband and either end up having this toxic relationship that they feel forced to keep in, or end up getting divorced. And what ends up happening is this child ends up suffering and he turns into an asshole himself. So
and then the cycle just perpetuates because they'll still, even though they're like miserable, there's like parents and children, they're still going to repeat the same pattern of behavior because that's what people do. That is the nature of the mind, is it absorbs things from the environment and then repeats or mimics those things.
Yeah.
Perpetuates these cultural norms. Yes. Yeah. So I think it's important for people to recognize why do we do these things? We do these things because they're a ritual, basically. Right?
Yeah.
I think
sorry. There's like a correlation between like education and marriage also. So like in places where like in places that are like really socioeconomically like strapped, there are more, not necessarily marriages, but there are more people being born, right? And so then if in a wealthier nation, so like probably in a place like Sweden, there's less just less people being birthed. Than other places that are more educated, and also there are it looks like this is an argument for marriage actually, but there are more married people. Like, so there are children are growing up in families more so than in places that are impoverished and people can't marry. So it's not like it's a tricky idea, but it's like the family is the best like a natural group that exists. Like it's the most natural group is the family, and if that's the case, then it's just better for kids to grow up in a family than not. That's the argument, like, for stay together for the kids. But I um I don't know at which point like it becomes like toxic to stay together for the kids, but it probably does.
Mhm. But family can come in many different forms. Our culture perpetuates the idea that family has to be a mother, a father, and kids.
Mm.
But in reality, in different cultures and different times of history, there have been many different types of families. So when I traveled through Indonesia and I stayed in Bajawa with the Nara people, they
Mhm.
they had a really interesting family structure because it wasn't this mother, father, and kids. It was
The
like the
nuclear
entire
family.
community. Huh?
The nuclear family.
Yeah, it wasn't a nuclear family. It was the entire community taking care of all kids. To the point that my friend that I stayed with, she was calling many different people her mother and her father. So her mother had died actually, but she was saying that, oh, my mother is giving me rice today or whatever, and my mother is going to the garden, and I'm like, and I realized she was talking about her aunt. And that, okay, at first I was like, okay, that's interesting. And then I recognized that she was also saying that about her father. So even though her father was alive and she was living in the same house with him, she would talk about her uncles and say that this was my father. She would say, "Oh, my father is, getting beans from over there," and I was like, "Oh, which father are you talking about?" And she was talking about not her actual biological father. So, and so I think it's interesting, and this is just cultural. This is the community that they were raised, and all these different this massive family lives together, and it doesn't have to be that you have this one biological mother and father. It can be different, but
True.
and yeah, and I think depending on what people do and how the culture is, different ways of raising kids could be much better than your standard mother father who's stressed about their jobs and has no time for their kids, and has no idea about uh, how the world works.
Yes.
Raising their kids.
Super tricky. Like, we have the same thing, like, people coming to Sweden from different cultures call everybody cousin or everybody brother, and we go, which brother? What? They don't differentiate from, like, someone they love as a brother or their actual biological brother. They don't change that. And also, like, I worked with kids, actually a kid that didn't have any parents at all, and I'm not sure if they died or left or whatever, but she was cared for by her aunt and uncle, I think. But then, as soon as that circle breaks, they don't have anyone because it's such a small circle. Even though a family can work, sometimes it's like hard. And there's like proverbs of you need a whole village to raise a kid, and that's what we do at university or like in school. Even though all of us have complaints about the school system, they still meet their friends' parents. They meet like many different fields. They learn to cooperate with many different people. So I'm not sure either, like that it has to be a family, and it can be very toxic as we mentioned it earlier.
Gotcha. So it doesn't have to be like that's actually nuance. I didn't consider that before. Like, but like that, it doesn't have to be the nuclear family. Like it like a family is better, but it can always be like what you described, like a communal type of family, not the nuclear family.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I
that's
think
where we came from as well. Like the nuclear family is just a very new thing. Like that's not how we used to be at all. Not even that long ago, really.
yeah, probably when we were, tribal people, we would all be just like the Indonesian family that I mentioned. Everyone
Yeah,
taking care of
exactly.
each other. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
most effective
Like
and
a few
efficient
thousand
way.
seconds ago.
Yeah.
Maybe many of the times, like tribal people might have fought just for different biological reasons, but on the other hand, they didn't discuss and fight over things because they noticed who worked better at different things, or they had to cooperate, so they didn't care if someone was, let's say, physically weak because they were stronger together. And yeah, same thing with kids. If someone's away, who's gonna feed the kids? Well, those who are there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that puts a lot less stress. Like,
yeah.
also, if you have this nuclear family, and think about how many parents would have split up due to factors that could have actually were just completely environmental, like not necessarily incompatibility of the individuals, but due to financial stress and whatever other factors could be at play.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
don't have that communal family to fall back on. There's no one else to take care of stuff. You can't just like leave and have some time to yourself. It's like always that stress. I think
Yeah.
that would be enough to drive a lot of people mad.
Yeah. I think it's important to note as well that this concept of marriage and then the concept of this type of family, I'm pretty sure is a result of gaining property. Because the history of why did people start getting married? It's to keep property, right? To make an agreement, a binding paper agreement, and so that you inherit land, so that you inherit other property. I'm quite sure that's how marriage started. And then it's perpetuated by the monetary system.
And also to perpetuate bloodlines.
Yeah. Which also has to do with property, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Otherwise, why would bloodlines be so important when we recognize all of ourselves, every person as one species? Yeah.
It's funny in Sweden about bloodlines. Like I was joking like a month ago that maybe some people would like to go back to the Viking era and blah blah. But actually, like racist people in Sweden do, like the National Front and stuff, and they talk about Viking Age. And if they want to go really far back, we're related to freaking stones and plants, and especially plants and animals, of course. But it's like, how far do they want to go back? And
Yeah, that's right.
and like the Swedish royal family about bloodlines, they're more German than Swedish actually. If you want to be picky, like they even have German last names, and I don't get that shit. It's
Well, that's
really
cool. They want to go to Viking sword fighting and all that.
the interesting part, by the way, is like most, in some sense, even religious organizations, but also like racist organizations, they're not very equal between the sexes, even like men and women, just that basic. And Vikings, like in Viking times, the women had the keys to the village. They had the utmost power in that way, and of course, they had a lot of power in the village too. And I think recent findings they found like female warriors with helmets and swords, even so. Maybe they weren't as common, but they existed. Even female samurais, there are even photographs of them from 1900s. So it's like it's never as simple as it looks. In most cultures, I think women were protected because they were giving birth, so it was semi-natural because of that. And then, if it's normal to only have men there, or like a very select few people who seems to do everything, or like a symbol of something to strive for, I don't know. But it's never that few people. Like Apple or Steve Jobs, there are many people in many different levels that help them, or even just something simple as just making the bloody phones themselves, like as basic as that. So it's yeah, I guess once again the world is global and is connected, but it doesn't show by these traditions at all. They come from a
And they
disconnected
create
world.
the illusion of separation.
Yeah, like we're talking, I think this morning about like nuclear weapons and war and like everything, even starvation. Like if we have trouble in Africa and different places, it shows even in Swedish shelves. For example, quinoa, it's not grown in too many places, so when it disappears sometimes from the shelves, and Swedes get scared and think the end is near and everything.
There's no more quinoa in the
Okay.
end.
Just kidding about
I like your example about nuclear war
Yeah,
is better than
yeah.
quinoa.
Yeah, but it's true. It's interesting. Like, it's good that we have foods in our shelves, but it's artificially, like,
First world
40%.
problems,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. 40% of the food is thrown away because it's not sold quick enough, or it has the wrong shape. Many
Yeah.
different things, and yeah, they even actually managed to make sure quinoa can grow in Sweden now, because they modified it. So now the farmer don't have to sell it expensively, and they can't even eat their base food, which is quinoa, in I think Bolivia and another country. So that's actually a good thing in this case, but it's fucked up. Like, many farmers in poor countries can't even buy the food they grow,
Yeah,
and
that's
who should have the right first to the food if not them? It would save a lot of cost for transport or whatever. It's
Selling food to make money to buy food.
yeah, exactly, and cheaper
Great
or
idea. You came up with that one.
grow. Talk about the loss.
Or it reminds me of like in some cases, like in the United States, like if you now the minimum wage law kind of increased, like the people are getting paid a little bit more, but it used to be like that a person could actually work and like not make enough money per hour to buy the hamburger that they're working for.
And then meanwhile, they're throwing away like one hamburger, or no, like freaking 5 hamburgers every 10 minutes or something, because they
Yeah.
can't stay on the shelf, and then nobody can eat those burgers. Have you seen that they have like I don't know if they do it anymore, but they had like a massive box and then this squasher that squashes down more and more hamburgers, I think in McDonald's, because of all the hamburgers that are lost because they've been on the shelf for too long.
They do
But
that in Sweden. Yes, they crush all the foods from the grocery stores, so
yeah.
no one can use them, or they take less space.
But anyway, going off topic, and Sam hasn't said anything. Hey, Sam.
Because his microphone's on mute.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm home now, so I can talk. But my connection doesn't seem that good, so I can't hear you exactly what you're saying. I'm just trying to figure out what you're saying, but it's difficult.
Cool. Well, I mean, the main topic was family and love, and one thing that I mentioned in the beginning of this talk was marriage as this concept, because in many places, most places in the world, and especially in Russia, it's this marriage is like a goal that people try to reach, and I see this as harmful to many people because they, especially women strive to find a husband, not to have a great relationship, to find, some love, some lover, or to, enjoy the company of another person per se, but really just to get married is a massive goal. And because of that, they rush to find any asshole, and then they end up in shitty situations and then have kids in shitty situations. And as a result, you have kids growing up and that are exposed to harmful relationships. So I'm wondering, in Italy, is it also a massive concept that people strive to achieve, to get?
Yeah. A lot of people try to find a partner because society push them to do it, especially in the south of Italy, where people are more traditional. In the south, for your relative, it's important that you find a partner at a very young age. So they push young people to find a partner, and they keep asking, "Where are you going to marry him or her?" There is so much pressure, you can't handle it.
Yeah, we had when I had this talk in Boots, a lot of people showed up. It was like more than 20 people because I think everyone is so interested in this topic, because everyone's so interested in family, and most of the people that come to my meeting are in their like late 20s, early 30s, and I don't know. One interesting point that we had was like one guy from Latvia came, And he was saying basically that, you know, one problem, right? If you're together with your wife or your husband for a long time, and you guys are bound together, you're not supposed to have sex with anybody else because that's what, you know, the laws of this game says. And then what ends up happening? You know, somebody ends up cheating, or somebody's just not sexually pleased, and then you just have this shitty relationship, and you don't have enough satisfaction in your life. And one point that my friend from Latvia, you know, brought up was, okay, well, if you really love this person, if you think you truly love this person, then you should let him do what they want. You should let that person do what they want. If they're not being satisfied by you, then you should let them. You know, if you really love them,
Yeah,
you
care
should.
about their
Yeah,
needs and emotions.
yeah. And if they need to, you know, screw a bunch of other people, then, you know, if you really care about them, then you should let them do that. What do you guys think about that?
You know, in the beginning, monogamy and custody was only required to women. So even if a male, if he was married, he could go around and fuck whoever he wanted, and the wife could say nothing about it. But now this concept, instead of being removed from women too, it has been extended even to males too. So even now from males it is expected to follow monogamy and custody. And that
And what would
agree
happen
with
if
your
the woman
response.
what would happen if the woman had a bunch of different partners?
What?
I said, what about if the woman had a bunch of different partners before, when it was okay for the men but not the women?
Yeah, it was okay in the past for the men, not for the women. Now it's more acceptable for women to have had other different partners before a marriage.
About love, by the way, I saw a really good video, I don't know, maybe a year ago, and I tried to find it, but I haven't found it yet. But it was about like today's idea of love and how old it is. And it's not very old. It's like, I think, 200 years, the idea of having the best love partner, sex partner, and maybe even parent, I think. Yeah, all in the same package. It should be like 10 out of 10 or something. Very unrealistic because if that partner is hungover, it doesn't matter if they were good or bad before they're not good at it. No. Whatever. It's very interesting because it's unrealistic and it's very fixed. It's like we even talked about appearance, expectations, fashions today. Like it's the same. Like if we look at our like physique, it really depends on like
You know,
genetics. A large.
marriage,
Yeah.
you know, marriage in the past was just a transaction between two families, two grandparents, let's say. They just used to sell the wife to the other family in return for money or something else. Then they extended the concept to this thing, this love thing between two people. But it wasn't about them in the past. In the past, it was about two families joining together for a bigger purpose. Let's say. I know
I
that
kind of
because my grandmother. Uh, both my grandmother had to marry another guy that was chosen by their family, not by them.
What do they think about arranged marriage?
What?
And what do they have to say about having someone else choose their partner?
For them, it was normal. They just ended up accepting it and maybe also, uh, I wouldn't say loving the partner, but kind of. They just got used to it.
Yeah, and then you just have this like boring, shitty life where you live with one person who you don't really like, you're not passionate about that person, and you have no opportunities to meet, you know, amazing people around the world that you could have an amazing connection with. Now you're bound to just this one person that you're just okay with, and you end up just having an okay life. Like, what's the point of having an okay life?
I think like we're might be looking at it from our perspective, and not from the perspective of the people that are in the arranged marriage. Like because so my grandmother and my grandfather were like it was an arranged marriage. They from my understanding is my grandfather was considerably older than my grandma, but like the way it went back then was they would just arrange it and that's how it would happen. Like there are no like on the side of say for example the woman there is nothing she can say, like she can't refuse like the when she's when she's sold off essentially. And but that wasn't necessarily a bad thing in that relationship because they didn't see it as that. They didn't like. I'm pretty sure my grandma didn't see herself as like being offered as a commodity that like she's being forced into like marriage. But and so that's just the way it is. Like they didn't have any outside sources to like to reference. So to them it wasn't a bad thing. It was just the thing that happened. But that's so yeah. Like I guess what I'm trying to say is that it might not necessarily be a bad. It's strange me saying this, but it might not necessarily be a bad thing if you don't know that there's an alternative. So
You
so
can
like,
say that about anything. You can
What's
say that
that?
about fucking children. You can say that
About
about
what?
anything. You can
Yeah,
say that
that's
about
true.
fucking children. About
Yeah, I
literally
suppose,
anything.
yeah.
Or
You can use an argument to justify anything, but that's just the way they saw it at the time. Like they didn't see any other options.
There was
Yeah.
an alternative. It
That's
was to
indoctrination.
women to go on,
Was that?
Christopher. Sorry if I interrupted you.
Sam or Chris, I don't know. What were you gonna say?
I just said that's indoctrination. You know, like
Yeah.
the mind doesn't have a mechanism to differentiate. It just takes in what it's presented.
that's
So
exactly.
you're exactly right. Like if you're in that situation, then you're not really going to question it, because if every single other person that you have ever encountered in your life does that, then that must be the thing to do.
You have no
And if you
idea.
don't question anything, then
You don't know what you're missing, yeah.
yeah.
Know that you even have an alternative at all. It's really
Yeah.
locked.
So it's like this, Bobby. If you never had an orgasm in your life, but you don't know what you're missing, is it not that you've never had an orgasm?
Yeah, you're right. Well, no, that's kind of like the tree in the forest argument. Like if you didn't hear a sound, did the tree fall? But but that's just I want to point out that's the way they saw it. Like I'm pretty sure like it's better like in the future people might be monogamous and and like in terms of sexuality they might be bisexual because it makes more sense because you have more access to more humans. I guess like that's just the most efficient way to be.
Things make you
I'm
sexual.
not condoning it. I'm just saying like that's the most that in terms of efficiency that's the best way to go about it.
Think about
To rub your body.
I don't know about that, but I would say polyamory. That would make more sense.
Yeah, polyamory but yeah, like I guess polyamory in its fullest is I guess polyamory with everyone. Like so yeah, I think that
to fuck a dude, you have to be attracted to a dude, not just.
that's what I'm saying. Like perhaps like the reason why people are like a heterosexual man. Perhaps the reason why he is a heterosexual man is because he's been indoctrinated to be that way. Like you grew up with you know, you grew up with the expectation of being that. So maybe if that social layer is removed, if that like kind of indoctrination is removed, then people might gravitate more towards kind of like like a polyamorous bisexual approach. Whereas instead of being either like falling into one of the camps, either heterosexual or or homosexual.
You know, we
Although-
don't know it yet how much of homosexuality is genetical and how much is nurtured. So
Environmental, yeah.
we can't make prediction. I think that at least a small part is nurture, so it can change as you said, could change in the future. But I suspect that there is a big component of genetic stuff, or at least development in the womb of your mother. So I think that we can change it, but not very much.
I don't think there's something that's been found that's like, a gay gene. I think I like the way that they put in one of the TROM books that, you know probably maybe it's just just a fetish, just like, people liking long hair, or they liking, people liking darker skin, or freaking feet, or small boobs, or big boobs, or whatever they might like. Maybe men liking men is just another fetish, or another, whatever.
I suspect that it has to do with also with the hormones and the way they affect the brain. So there might be a fetish component in it, but I suspect there is something more.
Well, there are like gay animals. Like there are like
that's what I would say.
animals. So
But again, like the animals just fucking something, like there's the toads that fuck shoes. Does that mean there's a gene for toads fucking shoes? Or yeah, I think it was toads. It just means toad likes fucking shoes, and toad likes fucking other same-sex toads.
But they don't know they are fucking shoes. They are just looking for a pattern in the surround, that they see something that resembles something they are supposed to fuck. So we can't compare that very much, because they are not that aware of what they are doing.
So you could say they're not aware of what they're doing, or maybe it's learned. I don't know if you could say that, like, so a dog is just humping stuff, and then suddenly it humps a female dog, and then there you go, procreation. Like, I think I don't know. I guess I don't know with 100%, but there might be more to it than that. There might be like maybe the dog is consciously aware that if they hump a female, then they would procreate.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a whole like pheromones. If the bitch is in heat, then they are very aware of that. But then if it's a guy, if it's a male dog, and there's no bitches, then yeah, probably they'll just start humping stuff, including your leg, maybe. And
is it true that I wanted to ask Chris if it is true that in Australia beetles fuck beer bottles because they are green? Is that true? Do you have any knowledge about it?
What did you say?
One species.
I heard that there is a species of beetle in Australia that fuck beer bottles because they are green and shiny, and genetically they are supposed to find for green and shiny partners.
That's interesting.
That could be true. I've never seen it. I don't think I've ever seen a beetle try to fuck anything, honestly.
It should be more.
Yeah, I should be more observant.
Yeah.
It might be hard to tell if it's beetle, whether it's walking or just moving.
Yeah, I know. Do they thrust? Like, how am I supposed to tell?
I don't know. They found the pictures online, so
just look for some beetle cum.
Yeah,
You can sell it as a trophy. I don't know. Yeah, it's also with monkeys actually. Like some monkey species, they're like, I'm not sure if it's a tradition or not, but the male monkeys, they train to have sex with each other, and then later probably I think do both. But anyway, that's
Isn't that also like just a domination thing? Like they just fuck them to who's boss.
Yeah, but it's like dolphins. They're supposedly culturally quite similar to humans. They do it for fun. Other animals, if they're horny enough, they just fly on things. Or like, there's so many crazy animals. I think it's like sea lions.
Rape
penguins to
penguins.
death.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Oh yeah, that's fucked.
Also, similar things.
I've shared with you a picture of that
Understands
video I
they
was
don't
talking
fight with
about.
each other. Also, they rape other animals and baby seals. Yeah, baby seals. I
Yeah.
think very not on the first page in the newspaper, right? No.
But anyway, although I think if we didn't have these cultural norms that were where people are forced basically to behave in a particular pattern and get married and form a nuclear family, you could be more open sexually, and it wouldn't be so. It wouldn't have to be so, like, I don't know, culturally crazy. Sex wouldn't have to be regarded as something sacred, or you don't have to hide your entire body, and then I don't know. I think that's where you get a lot of problems from. If two guys want to have sex, okay, who cares? They're enjoying it. Why is it anybody else's business?
And also, like, it's not weird that some people are not attracted to their partners when they're stressed out, and yeah, it's hard to be interested in fun things when you live in an annoying environment. Maybe it's I don't know.
Yeah.
So
And what you were talking about
It's
before,
definitely
like
a way to kill libido.
libido, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, as some actually say, like, it's a stereotype. I think a lot of guys says it, and a lot of girls too. I think, yeah. But like, getting married is a good way of getting a more boring life and less sex and everything. And like, it sounds like many people regret it when they get married. At times, they go, "What did I do? Everything became more boring."
It's also
And they're stuck in
sounds
that
like they
question.
made up their mind before they did it too.
What?
Sounds like that's part of the deal.
Yeah, to be
Like that's
confused.
how it's supposed to be.
You just accept it for what it is. But I mean, there have to be upsides. You can't just like it can't be all downsides to marriage. Like there has to be an upside. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it.
For some people, I agree with that, and I think also with oh shit, I can say it in English. Polyamorous people, like maybe some people will be that way, but they might not have 76 partners a day, or like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
though
Because someone's polyamorous doesn't mean they're having sex with everyone.
what?
No, I said yeah, that's right. Like just because someone is polyamorous doesn't mean they're like constantly having sex with everyone. It just means that that's kind of like that's the path they've chosen. But I mean, I think let's see, going back full circle to the whole marriage thing. Like yeah, there have to also be like upsides to it, like financial upsides. Obviously, there are financial upsides. Like being a couple is less expensive than being alone, and there's always someone kind of to help you out. The religious reasons, they're not real, but there are reasons, I guess. And maybe
Security.
other reasons.
But I think in a way it can be a false security, because if somebody really truly loves you, then they should let you do what you want to do, and if you really care about the person, then that it shouldn't matter whether you've signed a piece of paper, or had a party.
Right. I think that stuff is done for different reasons. Like the party is done for a different reason. It's done for the same reason like people buy an expensive car, right? Like to show financial strength.
You need approval from other people to prove that you love someone else.
Yeah, and also
Right.
that paper, how much love can fit in a piece of paper.
That's not love then, is it? Because that is that's an ego-based, finite, conditional gratification. That's purely for gratification. So like like Sasha said before, like if you really love someone, then if they're miserable because they're not getting enough sex from you, then really you should let them fuck who they want so that they can then be satisfied. If you don't let them do that, then that's not really love. That's just you clinging. I think it's in the video. I'm pretty sure it's like it says it's like a like a grasping, like trying to like a possession. That's it, possession. So you're trying to possess that person. That's not really love. Then that's just your own insecurity.
I think marriage is going way out there too.
You mean it gets less common?
Yeah, it gets less common over time because if you just look at like, for example, like our generation more or less is marrying a lot less than the previous generation, and I think previous generations are married less than previous ones, because it just over time have more. Well, especially women have more access to stuff that they didn't previously. Now I would say we're fairly in at least like first world unquote nations, like women are pretty much good to go. Like there is no there is no kind of like a woman can do whatever she wants technically, like has the same rights and privileges as a man in a first world society. So then it's not really that big of an issue. Like marriage is becoming less and less common, or women are marrying more and more later, like in places like Japan, because they're focusing on their career for the first like part of their life. So
That's actually
yeah, I think marriage is not something like we have to worry too much about, like because it is going out. Like every generation is going out.
Yeah, I think in the past, and still here and in a lot of cultures, um, marriage has some significance in that people are not so equal, perhaps not so equally minded. And in Russia, this still exists, but it's not necessarily seen as a bad thing that women aren't equal to men. It's just that they kind of have different roles and they are different, which is true. That women and men are different, but the thing is, they no longer really have much of a different role, because the woman is basically forced to work just as much as a man is in the system.
That's a big problem, actually. Like 3 big pieces that can't fit in a day. That's what I see. That's why they fight within their marriage, one of the reasons, and also with their kids, why they're super tired when they get home from work and they're supposed to be happy and energized as parents and listen to their children's interests. They have homework, everything. It's very hard to fit that in. It's unrealistic. And what I've heard about that is take the latest 8-hour standard that we got, not 12 hours before. But anyway, like women, the ideal is for women to do everything men do and everything they do at times. So everybody does too much, no matter their sex. It's crazy. Like it doesn't work. And
People jumping off buildings left, right, and center.
yeah, maybe they have fun for some seconds.
Oh my God, there's too much work. I'm gonna kill myself. Fucking nuts.
About
Really?
yeah. In Sweden, it's said that statistically, if you cut all the overtime, no one is jobless. Everybody got full-time work, no problem. So overtime in Sweden and other places, you don't always get paid for it even. If you have a monthly salary, then anything you work extra or anything you have to do, that's free, or then if you look your salary per hour, it's not as much as it says in the contract. It's
My mom works double what she gets paid because she gets salary for working 40 hours or whatever the hell, and she works 80 hours or more. And
Wow.
Let's hear that.
huh? Yeah, and she's been doing that ever since I was a kid. That's why as soon as I was like 11, I was made it my goal to never be that and to never ever do that. And that's why I've never had a real job.
That's an interesting point with parenting and love and everything and family. It's like parents don't understand why we sometimes do the opposite of our parents. And it's like we're not minimies. We grew up in a different generation, have different environments and shapes and even more ideas, which can be confusing at times, but also it makes it less likely to choose a bad one if we have the capacity to like be shaped into other things.
Yeah.
I think, like, yeah.
And
Not doing the same mistake as they did. Instead of getting married 4 times, you're together with which or whoever people until, yeah, you change to other people or whatever happens.
yeah, life can be so much simpler than people make it. You know, people make everything so complicated, and it's like goddamn, you want to be with somebody, be with them. It doesn't have to be that complicated. You don't have to think, is this the man of my future? Does this man have everything that I need? Is every standard? You're never gonna find every standard. You know, like Jacques says, you know, you're never gonna. You don't really. You'll never love everything about one person. You love certain aspects about a person. You know, sometimes you love them more, sometimes you love them less. But to have expectations hurts you.
That's
That is still egoic love, but that is that finite, love that depends on certain parameters, and as soon as like that is not fulfilled, then it disappears. So, like, if you love something about them, and then that person, and then they stop being that way, then it's gone. You can. To do that is always going to end up in suffering.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with families too, is that you depend on too few people. Like a sad example is a kid. If a kid's parents die in a car crash, there's two in one, two birds with one stone. But the two closest people to that person that know them best and are with them every time they go to sleep, everything, they're gone, and then that's it. It's a very hard thing to even bring up.
Yeah. And you know, that's kind of one argument here about why, because people always find it like horrifying that I don't want to have kids in Russia.
as if you think that just to offend other people, right?
Oh yes, I don't know. It's just, you know, how can you? Yeah. And I, you know, asked them, well, why? Why should I have kids? And their response most of the time is that so that the kid can take care of you when you're old.
Oh wow!
Like,
So
selfish reason to have a kid.
That's fear, straight up.
Yeah, and I mean, what, I'm gonna put such a massive responsibility onto my life just so that because I'm afraid of having nobody when I'm old. You know, and
what
this
if
is
it doesn't?
You're an asshole if you have no one when you're old.
yeah, and this is the thing, because we don't have big, strong communities anymore in cities anyway, in modern first world country cities. Yeah, you could end up alone and have nobody to take care of you. That doesn't scare me. I'll probably die before I get old. But it all comes from the culture. But what a selfish reason, I think.
That's
And also,
yeah. What if that's a terrible investment? Like, what if like kids just don't like that's
Yeah.
What if they fucking hate you?
that's very common. Some kids don't like their parents, and sometimes it's hard to find a reason for them to actually do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what did your father say to you? Said like,
Yeah.
I think that's one big problem is like, you know, people expect that their kids are going to love them and respect them without actually earning it. Like, that's not how it works. You still have to earn your child's respect. You can't just have a child and be like, oh, I'm just going to have a child because it's going to love me.
Yeah. That
is the worst.
love is in the blood or something.
That's the reason some people have kids, is to have something that loves them. And that's possession, you know, that's dangerous as well, to regard a human being as if you own them.
That's it's the same
and
for
then
me.
They're definitely going to hate you.
Especially when you hit them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Love me.
Hey, and that happens, and that's how you get psycho fucking killers.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Yeah, mistreatment is worse than anything easily, like in violence statistics. But it's very tricky. All of this. It's like false advertising. They say you're gonna get this and that, and you get something else, and you're surprised. It's like a lottery ticket, and you lose, and you go, "What? I was supposed to win." And any person who looked at the other side of it go, "No,
Well,
you lost
you have
time
to
you
work.
wanted.
You have to work for it. It's not just buying a ticket. It's not like you give birth and that's what you
Yeah.
get. It's
And
you know.
also, yeah, I remember a point now about marriage and kids. It's like it's a lack of self-respect, because if you take someone close to you and not showing what you need, what your needs are, or what you think is okay or not, then what do you expect the rest of your marriage? Or your kids, you say, oh, they're kids, they can do whatever they want. Either they hurt themselves badly, or they will not listen to anyone. Like I've noticed that actually, like with upbringing, if you never put a stop for a kid, they can get really restless because they don't know when to stop themselves, because they don't know when something's not okay, when you actually dare to say no, that's not okay. Because when you tell a kid if they're screaming this, they're hungry, if you have something beside you, you can give it to them in the meanwhile, but they can't get it every time. If not, they learn to scream every time they're hungry, and that doesn't work either. If they go to the town and scream at the square, no one will give them food. They will call the police or something maybe. But it's like it's really important actually. It's been shown that structure is more important for kids than love actually. Like because if we only are nice to kids, like some kids, whenever they scream, they get whatever they want, but then they get miserable when they get older, and maybe the only one to stop them is eventually the police, and then that's not good either, right? Because yeah, not a good way to live.
Then they go
Yeah,
to
that's how you make narcissists.
jail. Yeah.
Just like
Yeah.
giving them everything they want. The world revolves around you, Johnny.
Oh yeah, that's
I think what's also like really crazy is that, like a human being has like the mind, the brain is the most complex thing that we know of in the universe.
yeah.
And every time you have a child, you're bringing actually basically the most powerful fucking thing that we know of into the world with no regard for it at all. That's fucking insane.
I follow
Like,
that.
do it if you really want to do it, yeah, sure. But think about that shit.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not something you can just
it's no
forget.
joke. It's really not a joke.
Yeah, and when I was a kid, like 10, 11, and I saw a VCR player and I saw like a thick book of all the functions, you can rewind, whatever, many, many different small things. And then I turned around at my smaller siblings and I go, where's the book for those guys? Like it's like
You
for
thought
only,
that for a kid?
yeah,
As a
yeah,
kid?
yeah. It's like because it was so thick for only like technical stuff for the TV. Nowadays we just press it on and it's pretty simple menus. But before you had to like program your TV or VCR, and your parents scratched their head because they knew the old VCRs but not the new one. And a kid with different needs, allergies, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Making-
yeah. That's a point that Jiva always likes to bring up, and it's a good point that there is no school for parents, and that is possibly the
Yeah.
most important job you can ever have.
and the most complex because they have
Yeah.
to deal with the rest of society on a daily basis. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like from the moment they're born, like especially in that first time period, like just the way that you look at the child, like if it reacts and you don't give it the attention that it needs at that time, you're traumatizing that child. Like the child, that's how children develop things like ADHD, like attention deficit disorder, because
Really?
they're in that critical period of development. They're not getting the proper attention.
that's
Gabor Mate.
yeah.
Yeah.
So he's actually written a book on how to be a parent, like on the whole developmental psychology of children and how to like actually do that shit properly. That needs to be given to every single parent when they have a child, and then someone needs to make sure they read it.
Is he well informed on the subject? Have you read the book?
No, I don't have fucking kids.
Well, I mean, out of interest.
No, it would for sure be an interesting book. I haven't honestly read. I've listened to a lot of him, but I haven't read the book.
Yeah, he's an expert on addiction. That usually is based on
Yeah.
trauma. And of course, he's famous from the Psychist movement and Psychist Vancouver. He actually attended, and also Psychist addendum and Psychist moving forward. He was very featured.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
I've
he talks about how like development starts in the womb and how it's like if a mother is in a stressed environment, the hormones in her body will negatively affect the development of the child.
Yeah, and for alcoholic
So,
parents or mothers, the kids can be born with chronic alcoholism. So it's pretty brutal.
yeah, so it's not even from birth; it's from conception.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's fucking
Yet
crazy.
the people having the most babies are the ones in the shittiest situations. I think that are the
Yeah.
least educated.
And giving the least thought to what they're doing.
Yeah, and we have countries such as the one I'm in now, where they give an incentive, a monetary incentive for people to have more babies.
We have that here too.
Yeah, that really in Australia. But
Yeah,
there's
of
a
course.
difference. Help a parent with some financial support, and then or give an incentive of like, here's a few $1,000s if you have 4 or more kids. Is so irresponsible.
So only if you have a certain amount, because in Sweden you get some amount to be able to afford to have a kid. That's more like it, but of course, yeah. That makes sure that some people actually get more kids probably in Sweden than they would otherwise. But sometimes it's a religious thing, I think. Like in some religions, getting more kids is good, and that's your mission of the whole family. It's just to fuck like rabbits without protection, I guess.
Yeah.
Giving them support after the fact, like after a child is born, is probably like the best thing you can do, like, you know, social welfare programs and stuff. But I don't know, giving money, like giving a financial incentive to people for procreating is probably not a good idea, because, like, I mean, globally we need less people, but economies still want more consumers. Like they still see growth as, like, you know, as their reason for being. So like back in 2000, I don't know what it is, like 2004 or something, like when the first Iraq war was kind of like heated up, the president of the United States said, you know, do you want to know how to help? Buy more stuff. Like have more kids so that they can buy more stuff, so that they can like go to work and, you know, keep the economy going. So that's their argument for like for it, which is really really ludicrous. But when you're not
Yeah,
seeing this from a global perspective, it's different.
yeah. It's just so primitive. There's no regard for the carrying capacity of the earth. There's no regard for even just taking a global look at what we're doing. I mean, there is no country that's self-sustainable, I don't believe. And it's all run by a system that's based on profit, a system that's taking more and more and more from the earth. Like, how much longer can we live like this and have absolutely no respect for our earth, or what? Yeah, it's ludicrous.
And just keep, you know, just keep like they incentivize people on just popping out babies. Like in Japan, they're asking people to have more kids because they're at a deficit of human beings. Like they're not growing, the population isn't growing, so they're like, okay, we gotta have more kids. But Japan is small. Like there's not a lot of land area, so they probably shouldn't have any more people that that they can't support by land. So, and then like, you know, people are more stressed out, and then, you know, the whole marriage is, even in Japan, I think like marriage is something that like people are pushed towards like from a young age. So then they have to deal with the stress of like being able to afford marriage, being able to afford a child, and all that stuff, because it's all just psychological stress from like things that you socially have to do. Well, that you're told you have to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's think about solutions then.
A solution to it. I don't know.
One, yeah.
How do you stop marriage from happening, or how do you
I would
decrease?
say question.
Maybe show alternatives, or I don't know, tell people how it is in different countries. That's what helped me, and like.
Later, dude.
Bye.
Bye, Simon.
Bye. Have a nice job.
That do different.
Bye, Sam.
Yeah. Oh, bye.
Sorry.
I don't know. I don't know how you
Yeah,
use marriages.
it comes some university and different.
Did the connection just go really
Yeah,
shit for you guys as well, or is it just me?
No, me too.
lagging crazy or
Okay.
Oh, you know what? Yeah,
Interesting.
oh, the battery. Yeah, anyway, I guess it could help to show people different alternatives or at least describe it because I think if they about that.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
what causes
Education.
marriage? I would say. Like,
culture. So
yeah. So, I guess what I'm saying, like, go after whatever the causes of marriage are, and then we'll figure out a way to uh, prevent them. But like that's the only way to prevent it, at the global stage. But I don't know. I don't think marriage and religion are two things that are not going to go away. There's going to take generational time before they're gone.
yeah,
Before
we
they're
can't just go with
obsolete.
it.
I think religion is disappearing quicker than marriage.
I know that the Islam population is growing at least. I think Christianity is going down a bit globally, but I don't know. Maybe atheism is going up at least because that alternative haven't always been on the table or at least not accepted.
Yeah, but the majority of Islam is in third world countries.
Where they're having more babies.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they just it's that they just have much less exposure to other cultures and to other ways of living.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be really fucking difficult to convince anyone, especially with Islam. Like you can't apostatize Islam without fear of death. Like it's the only religion that stipulates that very specifically. Like if you want to get out of this, we'll kill you.
There is a group of atheists in Iraq that my friend Amar, was is part of. So I mean, there are ways to move culture into different directions, and I think what's really important. I mean, now we can use the internet, to spread ideas. And what's important is just to get people to question everything, but especially question their own culture and their own cultural norms. I mean, I think it's easy to explain to an 11-year-old kid that marriage is just a ritual, and everything that we've been talking about today, that, why do you need the approval of other people to say that you love another person and you want to be with someone else? Why do you need to sign a piece of paper and have a party to spend the rest of your life with someone if that's what you want to do? Is it healthy to be obliged to spend your entire life with one person? What are you losing? What are your other options? How could this world look if we didn't have these cultural norms, pushed upon us?
Is marriage compatible with any type of freedom? And if so, which one?
Then you have to define what that means.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
What is this freedom? Yeah, and same goes for having children. Why do you want to have kids? What are your other options? Because the thing is, making these two things, marriage and children, as the goal of your life, that kind of takes away your other options. What are your other options?
Where's your time?
Yeah.
Flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't want to have kids. My other option is to go travel around the world, to go explore. And I love that, and I love my life. And many people don't even think about that. They just see their only option and their goal as marriage and kids. And then once they have that, surely they can't travel around the world. At least not with very little.
Yeah, well, no. Once you have kids, like you're pretty much restricted. Like you can't do anything. Like you can't go anywhere. Like for example, like if I had a kid, like I travel for work. Like if I would not be able to go anywhere. Like I would be restricted to like home. Like, but I don't know. Like I always try to find like what are the great benefits of this of marriage. Otherwise, like, well, how did it come to be? Like there has to be like some kind of a benefit to it. And like we went over like the financial benefit, the religious benefit. That's not the real benefit, but it's there. Like social acceptance, and maybe health. I mean, if you're one would assume if you're having sex with only one person, then that is healthier than having multiple partners throughout your life.
In
But
terms of not getting STDs.
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of, like getting STDs, like that would be the healthier choice is like to have sex with like one person. So these are the only things that I see as like benefits. Like the
You can
downsides.
use a condom, and not have like ridiculous amounts of sex with many different people.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like theoretically speaking, if it's at least more than one, then it's technically like double your chances of contracting something, for example. So
But you can just get yourself tested.
well, yeah, no, I'm saying like yeah, there are a lot of steps you could take, like to prevent like sexually transmitted diseases. But I'm just saying like that as a benefit, it is a real benefit. Well, it may be not if you like because you only have sex with one person for your whole life. But if there is a benefit, then that would have to be to go down on the benefits column. Is the health.
Yeah.
The
But
safety, the security.
yeah, for safety, yeah, I suppose, like because you're not really talking to a lot of different people, so I don't know, like
Like what I've heard, like statistically, is that people who have kids live shorter sometimes because it's so stressful. If a person have a long time relationship that works, they live longer. So it depends, but then it have to be a good relationship, and yeah, probably voluntary, because if not, they won't appreciate each other.
Yeah.
They won't be extensional.
And then think about it though. What you're talking about here is not the benefit of marriage. That's the benefit of just having a relationship with one person and just being with them. You don't need to sign a piece of paper and have a party to, stop yourself from having sex with other people. And
yeah,
if
there
you,
are definitely downsides.
yeah, and I mean, if you're forced to just be with this one person because of this piece of paper, then that's not, if you feel forced by it, then that's also not something you really truly want to do, and that could be harming you one way or another, or at least stopping you from getting full fulfillment from life.
Yeah, true.
It's not really what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. Like if you're talking about health and security and longevity and all those things, you could be polyamorous, you could be single, you could be married, and in any one of those situations, you could either be super stressed and resentful and just hate your situation, or you could be super happy and live to be 100. Like none of those factors have anything to do with who or like who you're with and what way that relationship is, like if it's with a piece of paper or it's free or like whatever.
Yeah, but it's today's system and culture that pushes people to have this particular relationship, rather than choosing what's best for them, which can also influence their health and happiness and everything else that they do in life.
I think even though we're quite uncivilized today, by my understanding and standards, it still maybe shows how big a deal marriage usually is culturally. It's a very big thing that connects many social actions and things and traditions, many things. So maybe that's why our like behavior and rights and thinking have developed a bit in other fields, but not in this. At least not generally, and some cultures are closed off to it, so they only have one option, as we mentioned before. But what do you think it could be an option to this? Could we have a party without getting married that people would actually attend, or do we need to use Halloween for that?
They wouldn't see it as that important, you know. I put on Facebook. I put like you can put like a life event website. I put that as a life event, and it like not didn't get much reaction about it because I think Facebook probably didn't categorize it as a life event. You know, if I
What
put
did
like
you put as a life event?
when I made my website,
Yeah.
Big World Small Sasha as a life event because it is, but you know, anytime anybody gets married, I look, it shows up, you know, or has a baby, it shows up as a life event because that's what's seen as super important. So if you just have a party, people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, I have to show up. I'm going to fly from halfway around the world to go to your freaking, you know, birthday party.
Have you
No.
Depends how much free booze there is.
Exactly. That's one thing that still can get people to parties, because when I was younger, like to meet people at different places, or they say, oh, this friend has, yeah, he gets to borrow his parents' house and they were nice enough to make food, you can come, we have extra food, whatever it is. Or of course classical booze parties in Sweden and other countries. But for me, like, it was easier when I was younger. People were more uh, less set in patterns, so they could like have a party and people show up. But now it's like, how old does she get? Is there free booze? Is there, you know, like many a list of things? Even though people are tense and bored at times, they just want to go a party. They still have like many expectations. And sometimes I think when it comes to friends, when people are the most malnourished socially, they have higher like demands. So sometimes people need to be tricked to meet other people, and then they can get there. But if someone asks them, do you want to do this? Nah, it's too uncomfortable to do something different. I'm gonna stay here, even though I suffer more staying at home tonight than actually going somewhere. Have you noticed that too, like socially, that people shut off even though they need the opposite?
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe
Because a lot of people don't do what is good for them because they don't like themselves that much,
or maybe don't respect themselves, or think, yeah.
Yeah, I
Still
mean, that's what I mean. Like you know, like people like trying to convince people who are miserable to like do really normal things like exercise or eat well. Like if you feel shit about yourself, then you're much less likely to do anything good for yourself, which is ridiculous because that's the time when you really need to do something good for yourself. And then you just that's how people get stuck in loops, you know? And then you get used to that certain pattern of behavior. And then you just repeat that over and over because then it becomes a neurological network in your brain. And then you just end up miserable for your whole life.
It's like anxiety. Many people who have like real anxiety and depression, they do just as you described, the opposite of what they need and what they feel good about. So it becomes worse. So it's really tricky, and it becomes like a set pattern in the brain eventually. Like, it's hard to get out of, and when you do, you could get back. It's crazy. Maybe there should be a law that you should be able to trick or drag out your friends if they hurt themselves in different ways.
It can be hard.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very simplified the way I mention it. Maybe it sounds even violent, drag someone out their apartment. It sounds like a bit crazy, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But in terms of the benefits of marriage, what Bobby was talking about, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's a sense of security. You know, that they need this binding ritual to have a psychological belief that this is, you know, that there's a bind between, you know, these two people. But yeah, you know, and then you have certain responsibilities, and you know, that's reinforced by the culture, by products, making a lot of money off of weddings and family items that family would need, and divorce as well is something that you can make a lot of money out of.
Lawyers make a lot of money doing divorces.
Well, I mean, there's divorce lawyers, right?
Yeah, divorce lawyers and
Yeah,
and
an
then
entire career based on something that's imaginary. I
yeah,
mean,
exactly.
careers, most careers are made out of by something that's imaginary. So,
Their job is to like work on a made up problem like
yeah,
divorce, which is like yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's the
yeah.
magic of the law.
Actually, we had an interesting talk last Wednesday here in Irkutsk with my group, um, and one was like we were talking about what's the purpose of these careers and whatever, and one guy was oh, but you're working to be responsible to bring something to society, and I don't know, I kind of made this point of, well, why is it important if you have some kind of job that doesn't actually benefit the future of humanity? If you're a divorce lawyer, how is that actually benefiting us as a human species on the planet? I think the example there I had was like if you work for an advertisement company for the fashion industry, for example, it's not necessarily benefiting humanity. Anyway,
Yeah,
that's sorry.
sadly that can be said about so many professions, like even like so many professions, like just think about like whatever it is that you do and think about like how it can be automated and you don't have to do it. Like I just and like
Yeah,
so many jobs, like so many like well sought after jobs, like lawyer, for example. The like I've lost like my kind of respect for the law like a while back when the court case was there was a specific court case where one kid killed a bunch of people and then like he got off totally scot free because his parents hired the right lawyer and they hired the right doctor to like check up on him. And then I just pretty much stopped caring about the law because that means like you can literally kill people and get away with it if you have enough, like if you have enough money and the right lawyer. But like for example, the job of lawyer, it's a job that like doesn't need to exist, but like it's the same as every other job, and people still seek it out just because of the money. Like there are people who are lawyers who don't care about the law. Like they care about the law because they had to study it, but they don't really care. Like they see their job as being a not necessary job in the grand scheme of things. In fact, I
yeah,
see that my job's absolutely not necessary. Like, but I still do it because I need, because it's like a method of making money. But
yeah.
that's it. Like, it's the
Yeah, you
when
want to live,
married,
don't you? You want to
I
eat.
hate
was
it.
that?
You want to eat.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like you want to eat, like you're gonna work. Like, but that's
yeah.
Hands
like,
got to eat.
But this is how I deal with the situation. So I recognize that. I recognize that it's not important and it's complete bullshit that just exists because we live in this completely inefficient, ridiculous system. But since we have to live in it, I recognize that and I make it my goal. Okay, I'm going to work for a short amount as possible, for a short amount of time as possible, make as much money as possible, and get it over with. And recognize that it's just a game. It's not important. And this stupid like bartending or waitressing job, or usually jobs like that I get, is complete bullshit. But let me play this game for a few months so that I can do what I want in life, and then I quit and do what I want. And it's
yeah,
great until I
just
fucking work again.
an expert bartender traveling place to place. It's like,
Yeah,
it's pretty cool
that's
stuff.
All right, guys, I got to go to bed.
yeah. Yeah, we should probably go as well. I've been running these conversations for way like too long. Some of the previous ones like 4 hours. So
Wow.
yeah.
4 hours.
Yeah, I mean they were really interesting, but we're off topic now as well, and it's just but I do love talking to you guys. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. It was cool. Like, oh, it's guess what? In a couple hours, it's time for me to go do capitalism.
Capitalism.
I've heard about that. Is it fun?
It's never fun
I
to
would
do
be so
capitalism.
lost without it. Really, I wouldn't know what to do with my life.
Maybe you still don't. Oh no.
Yeah. Good luck doing capitalism.
Gotcha.
I'm hiking next week, so I won't be online. But the week after,
You won't
I'll
be
probably
on
do.
capitalism.
I will not. I'm off capitalism for a few more months until I have no more capital.
Me too. I'm up for like 6 weeks more, I think.
Damn, that's the plan. Well, I hope you don't run out of capital soon. So, yeah.
And have to go back.
No. Well, it was good meeting you guys. I think I'm gonna head out now, also. So,
Wait,
Nice
should we say
talking
final
to you.
word and Chris, if you want to go, I know you wanted to go, so but maybe we should say some final words for this topic. For me, my final words would be to question, what is marriage? Why do you want to get married? What does it mean to you? Why do you really need it? And same goes for having kids. Why? Like, you shouldn't have kids until one, you know that these kids can have a good future, and two, you know why you want to have kids. Because I
And you're
think a
not
lot
a kid yourself.
you're not a kid yourself, yeah.
Yeah.
So
And have the capabilities to actually raise a kid.
yeah,
I
exactly.
guess. Or read up.
Read
Like,
that fucking book.
Yeah.
you have to look that up. It's
Martin.
good that you reminded me.
Yeah, it's hard to. You basically can't be certain that a kid is gonna have a good future nowadays.
Yeah, no,
But
maybe never, but yeah.
yeah, but if you really, really want to have kids, at least make sure your own situation can create a good person in this world.
Or maybe
Yeah.
give them the time to survive by themselves. With or without you.
Well, that's hard to do.
Yeah, but I mean,
they need to be raised, be
to some
responsible.
extent.
I'll say my final thought of what I got is pretty much that something really important. The family doesn't have to come in the form of like a traditional nuclear family. It can also come in different forms, like in a communal family, like in the communes of late 60s in America, or in like the kibbutz in Israel that's still current. So family can come in different forms. It doesn't have to be the traditional TV family of one, two parents and a child. So that's kind of what I got out of most of the whole like discussion. And yeah, that's it. That's family doesn't have to be the traditional family. It can come in other forms, and it might be more efficient if it came in as a different, like, bigger communal family than if it was two parents taking care of multiple kids.
Yeah. Yeah, and also what's important is for the people in a family to care about each other and show love and respect for each other and help each other rather than to just be forced into being in a relationship. So
Yeah. I would say that before you do any of those things, that you need to love and respect yourself and not just use some other person, some other being as a way to try and get that, because that's always going to fail. And then you make everyone else your own. By doing it that way, you're just creating more misery for that person as well.
yep.
You're doubling it up.
Yeah. You're infecting people with your misery.
Oh, that was quite depressing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we leaving it at that? Do not infect
Yeah, that was it.
your misery.
Oh, has your tag on Facebook or something. Don't
infect
other
people with your misery. Yeah, infect them with your
That would
chlamydia.
be, don't infect other people with your miserable capitalism, or I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, guys. All right, thanks for coming on. I will speak to you next time if you're here.
Yeah.
Hope to see
See
you
you
guys.
guys soon.
All right, bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.